Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode where I'll be working on some recycled scatter for my dungeons, making this table and the books as well as the bookcase in the background. So to begin, I'll just be taking some of this trash cardboard here that we have left over, and this will be what I use to base all of my builds off today. So I'll just start with my miniature here, and just kind of eyeball for a size that looks about proportionate to them, and then cut that out carefully. And that will be the base for my table. Now for the actual planks, I'll just be using some popsicle sticks, and I'll just simply and carefully cut those down to a thinner plank size that will fit all the way across the top of that, and carefully trim them down. Now for all the burrs and edges, I will take one of my files here and just roughly sand that down, not being too perfect with it, but enough to get a fairly clean edge that those will stack nicely on. Now just hot glue each of those in place carefully until that's completely covered. Now, the purpose of this video today is that myself and a few other YouTubers that I'll have linked down below are doing some recycled and trash bash thing for Halloween. I didn't necessarily realize that until after videos started coming out, so this is something I've been wanting to do for a little bit, and this seemed like a good reason to go ahead and get some scatter made for my dungeon. So that is what I'll be doing here today, and I've seen some of the other builds that some of these other YouTubers have made, Cleric's Creation and a few others, and you should definitely go check those out as well. Now with hot glue, you make sure you want to use just a little bit, just enough to kind of stick those together, but not so much that you're having to do a whole bunch of cleanup. There was a few spots I did have a little bit of overflow and had to trim that out with the utility knife, but it wasn't too bad all in all. Now for legs, just make sure to make each of those the same size, and I think with a 1/2 inch on each of those, and then just carefully score around all of the edges of that, and they'll snap pretty easily. From there, just hot glue each of those into the corners there, and that table is pretty much done. Now for the actual construction and paint time, I maybe spent 12 to 15 minutes on this, and it's a pretty good little project, I think, for adding to your scatter. And definitely suits this wizard here very nicely. Now to finish off the building of this table, I'll just take this file down one more time and go around all the edges real good, as well as the feet, just to kind of help that sit a little more evenly before painting that. Now to actually do the paint, I'll just take some nutmeg brown acrylic paint and a little bit of water there, and just brush that all over there, just to get it soaked into the wood and add a bit of color variation to it. Makes it a little bit different from the wood color that it already is, and then I'll just take a little bit of black there just to clean up the bottom of the table. Now for some other little decorations, I'm going to just take some of this weathered paper I had left over from map making and just cut out small little rectangles that look about the right size for a piece of parchment that'd be sitting on the table. Take my 02 size pen, and then I will just do a little bit of scribbling and drawing on each of these little pieces of parchment, just as to show different notes or letters and maps that could be sitting onto these tables and bookshelves as a decoration and add a little bit more liveliness and interest to your dungeons. So I'll weather this up just a little bit by crinkling it up and rolling it around like it'd been rolled up before and unraveled. And then I'll just place those onto the bookshelves and table there, just to add a little bit of life and texture to the game board. After that, we're going to move on to the bookcase here by following pretty simple and similar steps. So we'll start by just cutting out a rectangle that's going to be a little bit bigger for the wall in the background to hold some books. And we're going to start trimming down the popsicle sticks using the same method as before, just scoring all around the outside and then covering those planks. Now I left all the boards for the bookcase at the normal width of a popsicle stick, just to add a little bit of difference between the two builds, and I think that the wider planks looked a little nicer on this. I did have to trim them down a little bit once I started placing the shelves in later on, but it was very minimal at most. So we'll just follow the same steps of just adding that border all around the edge to create the frame of the bookcase. And then while you're doing this is the best time to go ahead and trim up any of the hot glue that might get into the cracks and crevices there while you're working on the build. So I'll just cut down another popsicle stick to the right length to actually fit into the shelf there. And then once that is in place, you'll see that it sticks out just a little bit, so I'll go ahead and mark down where that needs to be cut down. And then very carefully take my utility knife and trim that down to fit. You may need to use your file or even the edge of the utility blade there very carefully just to smooth that out a little bit. And if there's anything in this video that you'd like to add to your own collection of art supplies to make any of these, be sure to check the links down in the description to get your hands on any of those tools and resources. Once that's all trimmed up, I will go ahead and glue in the second shelf in there. I went ahead and just left it at 2 shelves for this build so that I could carefully and easily put in different pieces of decorations onto the shelves, like these books here that are made just for some recycled foam, but they can be very easily stuck in there, as well as some of the other small decorations, without being too cluttered or too tight to try to maneuver and mess with. So I'll use the same wash as before. This one had maybe a drop or two of black on it on the brush still, and just mix that all the way in so it's slightly darker, but I think it makes a nice wood texture and color as well. Now to actually make the books, I'll take just one of my bricks from another one of my builds and take the wire brush to create the pages effects on it. And then I will trim that down just into thin slices that can be covered in parchment in just a moment. So we'll make sure to cut the length of that in a way that will fit as the both covers and the spine, and then just a little bit of hot glue in there. Now you could definitely use white glue instead of hot glue and it'd be a lot less of a mess and easier to work with, but I'm pretty prone to using the hot glue just for the aspect of the speed alone, and it helps me work at a pace that is consistent and keeps moving forward. So to finish these books off, I'll just add a little bit of a fake title by scribbling and maybe drawing on there a little bit, and then just taking some white and painting around the edges of that. Now you could definitely use a more yellow paint to do those pages, or just use a wash over the edges to make them look a little older and more weathered. But I was pretty happy with the look of that, and they stack in the bookcase pretty nicely. And that completes this introductory to Little Bits of Scatter for your dungeon. If you wanted to expand on this, you could certainly do so pretty easily. And if you like this type of content, be sure to like and subscribe for more.